Good morning, friends. My name is Ben Johnson, lead pastor of St Mary's Anglican Church in Mervu North, and today we come to chapter 2 of Jonah. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through it. If not, press pause and take some time to read through that chapter and maybe even start at the final verse of chapter 1, where God sends a great big fish to swallow Jonah up. But the focus of today's message and today's devotion is actually on Jonah's gutsy prayer. A prayer of anguish, a prayer of torment. And I think of, as I read these words of Jonah, and I read of Jonah's situation, what comes to my mind is actually Eeyore's wise words in Winnie the Pooh, where he cries out in sadness and despair. I think of that every time I read the words of Jonah. I think of the words of Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh, where he cries out sadness and despair, because that is the situation that we find Jonah in right now, of sadness and despair. Now it's interesting as we read this passage how we find that we encounter God within our lives. Because often, as I was reading a bit through this and thinking about this, I was thinking how so often we search for those mountaintop experiences, those wonderful, blissful experiences where we attend a worship gathering or attend some kind of event, and it's so wonderful, it's so great, and we encounter God's grace and God's goodness, and it's like a mountaintop experience. Think God taking Moses up onto the mountain, or even when Jesus has the transfiguration up on the top of the mountain, and they're glowing, both of them, with that encounter with God. But actually here, we find that this is not a mountaintop experience. This is a valley experience. This is a place of anguish, of sadness, of torment and despair, where Jonah, from the very depths of his heart, cries out to God. Now, it'd be easy for us to simply look at Jonah's experience and then to find a bad day that we've had and to simply go, oh yeah, I can match those two. And I want to, I guess, first of all, give us a word of caution in thinking or finding it too easy to simply match a bad day that we might be having with Jonah's experience here. Because we often run the risk of diminishing Jonah's experience. But also I do want to encourage us as we read about Jonah's encounter with God here and God's saving mercy and how God listens, because we ought to be reminded that if God can hear Jonah, as Jonah sinks to the very depths of the ocean, if God can hear and God can respond there, then God can do so in our lives too, in whatever situation they'll be. Maybe it won't be as bad as Jonah's. Maybe it'll even be worse. And yet we can be reminded that God is a God who hears, and God is a God who responds. And so we hear the cry of Jonah's heart as he cries out to his Lord and his Saviour. And I wonder, as you think about your own situation right now, I wonder, my friends, what would the cry of your heart be right now on this very day, wherever you are? What is the cry of your heart? Right now, as I'm filming this, we're in the middle of stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne. All of regional Victoria is in stage 3. it is an anxious time. For many, it is a lonely time. For some, this is one of the most difficult times that they will have ever been through. What is the cry of your heart on this day as you seek to come before God? Wherever you are, in whatever context you are, know that God hears, that He listens, and that He acts. We find that God hears Jonah pouring out his heart to him. God heard Jonah's cry, and our God saves. He listens and He responds. And then, here's the most interesting and wonderful thing about this story. Because not only do we have God responding to Jonah, but actually we then have Jonah responding to the call that God has placed upon his life. And so, not only do I ask you, what is the cry of your own heart today? But the second question, the question that I want to leave you with this morning as you consider this passage, what is the call that God has placed upon your own lives, my friends? What is the call that God has placed upon your life? In whatever community and neighborhood that you have been sent to, placed within, where is God calling you to go? For as Jonah receives the goodness, the grace, and the mercy of God in saving him and in redeeming him from the very depths of the waters of the abyss, Jonah responds in obedience to the call that God has placed upon him. Go in peace, my friends, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.